ready? We're back. So we're at 3.3, I believe. Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Yeah, chapter 3.3. So, yeah, the girl was gonna throw hot boiling water at him, maybe. We'll see. So the gunslinger thought this man, prisoner or not, was probably better at the fine art of survival than any of the other men he had seen in the air carriage. The others were fat things, for the most part, and even those who looked reasonably fit also looked open, unguarded. Their faces, those of spoiled and cassetted children, faces of men who would fight eventually, but who would whine almost endlessly before they did. You could let their guts out onto their shoes. Their last expressions would not be of rage or agony, but stupid surprise. The prisoner was better, but not good enough. Not at all. The army woman, she saw something. I don't know what, but she saw something wrong. She's awake to him in a way she's not to the others. The prisoner sat down, looked at the limp-covered book he thought of as a Magda scene, although who Magda might have been or what she might have seen mattered not a whit to Roland. Gunslinger did not want to look at a book, amazing as such things were. He wanted to look at the woman in the army uniform. The urge to come forward and take control was very great, but he held against it, at least for the time being. The prisoner had gone somewhere and gotten a drug, not the drug he himself took, nor one that would help cure the gunslinger's sick body, but one that people paid a lot of money for because it was against the law. He would give this drug to his brother, who would in turn give it to a man named Balazar. The deal would be complete when Balazar traded them the kind of drug they took for this one. That was, the prisoner was able to correctly perform a ritual unknown to the gunslinger, and a world as strange as this must of necessity have many strange rituals. It was called clearing the customs. But the woman sees him. Could she keep him from clearing the customs? Roland thought. The answer was probably yes. And then, gaol. And if the prisoner was gaoled, then there would be no place to get the sort of medicine his infected body, dying body needed. He must clear the customs, Roland thought. He must. And he must go with his brother to this man Balazar. It's not in the plan. The brother won't like it, but he must. Because a man who dealt in drugs would either know a man or be a man who also cured the sick. A man who could listen to what was wrong, and then maybe he must clear the customs, Gunslinger thought. The answer was so large and simple, so close to him, that he very nearly did not see it at all. It was the drug the prisoner meant to smuggle in that would make clearing the customs so difficult. Of course, there might be some sort of oracle who might be consulted in the cases of people who seemed suspicious. Otherwise, Roland gleaned the clearing ceremony would be simplicity itself. A crossing a friendly border was in his own world. One made the sign of fealty to that kingdom's monarch, a simple token gesture, and was allowed to pass. He was able to take things from the prisoner's world to his own. Tudorfish Popkin proved that. He would take the bags of drugs as he had taken the popkin. The prisoner would clear the customs, and then Roland could bring the bags of drugs back. Can you? And here was a question disturbing enough to distract him from the view of water below. They had gone over what looked like a huge ocean and were now turning back towards the coastline. As they did, the water grew steadily closer. The air carriage was coming down. Eddie's glance was brief, cursory. Gunslingers erupted as the child seeing his first snowfall. He could take things from this world that he knew, but bring them back again? That was a thing of which he as yet had no knowing. He would have to find out. Gunslinger reached into the prisoner's pocket, closed the prisoner's fingers over a coin. Roland went back through the door. The birds flew away when he sat up. They hadn't dared come as close this time. He ached, he was woozy, feverish, yet it was amazing how much even a little bit of nourishment had revived him. He looked at the coin he had brought back with him this time. It looked like silver, but the reddish tint at the edge suggested it was really made of some baser metal. On one side was the profile of a man whose face suggested nobility, courage, stubbornness. His hair, both curled at the base of the skull and picked at the nape of the neck, suggested a bit of vanity as well. He turned the coin over, saw something so startling it caused him to cry out in a rusty, croaking voice. On the back was an eagle, the device which had decorated his own banner in those dim days when there had still been kingdoms and banners to symbolize them. Time's short, go back, hurry. But he tarried a moment longer, thinking. It was harder to think inside this head. Prisoners was far from clear, but it was temporarily at least a cleaner vessel than his own. To try the coin both ways was only half the experiment, wasn't it? He took one of the shells from his cartridge belt and folded it over the coin in his hand. Roland stepped back through the door. Just 2 seconds, I put a drink in the freezer because it'll... A monster. Sorry if that was loud. Alright. So we step through the door. The prisoner's coin was still there, firmly curled within the pocketed hand. Didn't have to come forward to check on the shell. He knew it hadn't made the trip. He came forward anyway, briefly, because there was one thing he had to know, had to see. So he turned as if to adjust a little paper on the back of his seat. By all the gods that ever were, there was paper everywhere in this world. And looked through the doorway. He saw his body collapse as before, now with a fresh trickle of blood flowing from a cut on his cheek. Stone must have done it when he left himself and crossed over. The cartridge he had been holding along with the coin lay at the base of the door on the sand. Still enough was answered the prisoner. The prisoner could clear the customs. The guards, oh, the watch, might search him from head to toe, from asshole to appetite and back again. They'd find nothing. The gunslinger settled back, content, unaware at least for the time being that he still had not grasped the extent of his problem. The 727 came in low, smooth over the salt marshes of Long Island, leaving sooty trails of spent fuel behind. Landing gear came down with a rumble and a thump. 3A. The man with the two-tone eyes straightened up, and Jane actually saw a snub-nosed Uzi in his hands, before she realized it was nothing but his duty declaration card and a little zipper bag, of the sort which men sometimes used to hold their passports. The plane settled like silk. Letting out a deep, shaking shudder, she tightened the red top on the thermos. "Call me an asshole," she said in a low voice to Susie, buckling the crossover belts now that it was too late. She had told Susie what she suspected on the final approach, so Susie would be ready. "You have every right." "No," Susie said, "you did the right thing. I overreacted, and dinner's on me." "Like hell it is, and don't look at him. Look at me. Smile, Janie." Jane smiled, nodded, wondered what in God's name was going on now. "You're watching his hands," Susie said, and laughed. Jane joined in. "I was watching what happened to his shirt when he bent over to get his bag. He's got enough stuff under there to stock a Woolworth's notions counter. Only I don't think he's carrying the kind of stuff you can buy at Woolworth's." Jane threw back her head, laughed again, feeling like a puppet. How do we handle it? Susie had 5 years seniority on her, and Jane, who only a minute ago had felt she had the situation under some desperate kind of control, now only felt glad to have Susie beside her. "We don't. Tell the captain while we're taxiing in. The captain speaks to customs. Your friend there gets in line like everyone else, except he gets pulled out of line by some men who escort him to the little room. It's going to be like the first in a very long successions of little rooms for him, I think." "Jesus," Jane was smiling, but chills, alternately hot and cold, were racing through her. She hit the pop release on her harness when the reverse thrusters began to wind down, handed the thermos to Susie, got up, rapped on the cockpit door. Not a terrorist, but a drug smuggler. Thank God for small favors. Yet, in a way, she hated it. He had been cute. Not much, but a little. He still doesn't see, the gunslinger thought with anger, drawing desperation. God! Eddie had bent to get the papers he needed for the ritual, and when he looked up, the army woman was staring at him, her eyes bulging, her cheeks as white as paper things on the backs of the seats. Silver tube with the red top, which he had at first taken for some kind of canteen, was apparently a weapon. She was holding it up between her breasts now. Roland thought that in a moment or two she would either throw it or spin off the red top and shoot him with it. Then she relaxed, buckled her harness, even though the thump told both the gunslinger and the prisoner the air carriage had already landed. She turned to the army woman she had sitting with and said something. The other woman laughed and nodded, but it was a real laugh. Gunslinger thought he was a river toad. The gunslinger wondered how the man whose mind had become temporary home for the gunslinger's own car could be so stupid. Some of it was that he was putting into his body, of course, one of this world's versions of devil weed, some but not all. He was not soft and unobservant like the others, but in time he might be. They are as they are because they live in the light, the gunslinger thought suddenly. That light of civilization you were taught to adore above all other things. They live in a world which has not moved on. If this was what people became in such a world, Roland was not sure he didn't prefer the dark. That was before the world moved on, people said in his own world. And it was always said in tones of bereft sadness. But it was perhaps sadness without thought, without consideration. She thought he meant to grab a weapon when he bent down to get the papers. When she saw the papers, she relaxed, did what everyone else did before the carriage came down to the ground again. Now she and her friend are talking and laughing, but their faces, her face especially, the face of the woman with the metal tube, are not right. They're talking, alright, but they're only pretending to laugh. That is because what they're talking about is him. The carriage was now moving along what seemed a long concrete road, one of many. Mostly, he watched the women, but from the edges of his vision, the gunslinger could see other air carriages moving here and there along the other roads. Some lumbered, some moved with incredible speed, not like carriages at all, but like projectiles fired from guns or cannons, preparing to leap into the air. As desperate as his own situation had become, part of him wanted very much to come forward and turn his head so he could see these vehicles as they leapt into the sky. They were man-made, but every bit as fabulous as the stories of Grand Featherex, which had supposedly once lived in a distant and probably mythical kingdom of Garland. More fabulous perhaps simply because these were man-made. The woman who had brought him the popkin unfastened her harness. This, less than a minute since she had fastened it, went forward to the small door. That's where the driver sits, the gunslinger thought. But when the door was opened, she stepped in and saw it apparently took 3 drivers to operate the air carriage, and even the brief glimpse he was afforded of what seemed like a million dials and levers and lights made him understand why. The prisoner was looking at all but seeing nothing. Court would have first sneered, then driven him through the nearest wall. The prisoner's mind was completely occupied with grabbing the bag under the seat and his light jacket from the overhead bin and facing the ordeal of the ritual. The prisoner saw nothing. The gunslinger saw everything. The woman thought him a thief or a madman. He, or perhaps it was yes, that's likely enough, did something to make her think that. She changed her mind, and then the other woman changed it back. Only now I think they know what's really wrong. They know he's going to try to profane the ritual. Then, in the thunderclap, he saw the rest of his problem. First, it wasn't just a matter of taking the bags into his world, as he had the coin. The coin hadn't been stuck to the prisoner's body with the glue string the prisoner had wrapped around and around his upper body to hold the bags tight to his skin. This glue string was only part of his problem. The prisoner hadn't missed the temporary disappearance of one coin among many, but when he realized that whatever it was he had risked his life for suddenly was gone, he was surely going to raise the racks. And what then? It was more than possible that the prisoner would begin to behave in a manner so irrational that it would get him locked away in gaol as quickly as being caught in the act of profanation. The loss would be bad enough for the bags under his arm to simply melt away to nothing. It would probably make him think he really had gone mad. Air carriage, ox-like now that it was on the ground, labored its way through a left turn. The gunslinger realized that he had no time for the luxury of further thought. He had to do more than come forward. He must make contact with Eddie Dean right now. Wow. So he's making contact. Well, hope you guys like the video. I'll see you next time. Take care and please subscribe and like because it helps. Thanks.